customers. With over 10 years' experience in onshore wind energy, we operate multiple wind farms throughout the US. We also aim to be a leader in offshore wind, leveraging our experience over decades of traditional operations. We are rapidly scaling up our offshore portfolio and already have a pipeline of 5.2 gigawatts net generating capacity. We are accelerating our portfolio growth through Lightsource BP and BP US Solar. Lightsource BP has a growth strategy of developing 25 gigawatts by 2025. Our hydrogen aim is to secure a 10% market share in key geographies by 2030. Both green and blue hydrogen can help decarbonize transport and industry. Advancements in carbon capture and storage provide exciting opportunities and the possibility of deep emissions reduction. BP is reimagining energy, helping the world get to net zero.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this afternoon's session of the Global Market Theatres. Today is World Bank Offshore Wind Day, and for the next 3 hours, the Global Wind Energy Council will hand the stage over to some colleagues and friends from the World Bank. And to kick it off, we have a wind expert and a legend in the wind industry, offshore wind industry, Alistair Dutton, to walk us through the panel. Alistair will be taking the panel about around the regions, and the first regions we're going to be looking at is South and East Asia. So please welcome the panel and Alistair.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Okay, so it's a great pleasure to bring countries from South and East Asia. I will let them introduce themselves, then I've got a series of questions to get us going, but I'd very much invite questions from the audience and get some interaction going. So feel free, put your hand up and we'll get a microphone to you. But if I could just ask Mylene to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Alistair. My name is Mylene Kapongkol. I'm the officer in charge, Assistant Secretary of the Department of Energy, Philippines. So we're in charge of issuing policies, and actually that would include issuance and administration of service contracts for renewable energy projects.
A lot's happening in the Philippines, so definitely lots of questions from Mylene.
I'm Mapatrana, Secretary Minister of Power and Energy of Sri Lanka. We are making policies as well as implementing some projects related to the energy and power sector.
And your neighbors in India?
Yeah. My name is Moreshwar Dhakate. I am Chief Engineer in Central Electricity Authority. It is the attached technical wing in Ministry of Power. So we make policy decisions or help ministry in taking the policy decisions. So there are various wings. So with the overall grid we handle, and my particular division, renewables, we handle all sort of REs and policy and everything.
I suspect you're very busy at the moment. And Mr. Ray.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Phạm Nguyên Hùng. I come from the Ministry of Industry and Trade of Vietnam. I'm a Deputy Director General of Electricity and Renewable Energy Authority. Hello, everybody, and thank you, all of you, attend today.
So we have Philippines, Sri Lanka, India, and Vietnam. Quite an audience. I'll start the questions away, but I'll also be looking out for hands up at any time. So, Mylene, why is your country interested in developing offshore wind, and do you have any targets?
Yes, thank you, Alistair. Actually, the Department of Energy, or the Philippines, is venturing into more renewable energy development in the country, having a targeted energy transition for the Philippines. As you know, we're 60% coal-fired supply industry, and what we want to do is to achieve 35% of our share in the power generation mix by 2030. And we're developing the necessary policies and investment-friendly policies and programs that would enable all the renewable energy to come into the Philippines and invest.
It's happening quite fast,
Yes, actually, it's fast.
which is good. And Sri Lanka, what's your interest?
Yeah, Sri Lankan government stepping up the effort to achieve 70% of the renewable energy target in year 2030. To achieve this ambiguous targets, last existing power capacity of 750 megawatt need to be increased to the additional adding another 4,800 megawatt while enhancing wind power capacity of existing 248 million megawatt by another 3,500 megawatt in coming years, being the density of population of Sri Lanka and currently environment and social the constraint effect of the rapid development and the renewable energy product is very much vital for us. In the same time, the further large legal framework and the land acquisition process of Sri Lanka is fairly cumbersome. In the case of the existing power plant, the renewable energy also taking much time for these kind of constraints we are facing. I think it's a good opportunity for us to make use of these opportunities rather very minimal compared to the rest of other initiative. Then observe wind is very much good opportunity for Sri Lanka to take care of our future power generation, not only the domestic as well as in the share with the regional perspective as well as other countries.
Very good. And India has been looking at offshore wind for quite a while, but I detect some movement recently. So please share with us what the interest is in India.
So India has put in his RE policy. So into the solar is progressing very good. But regarding offshore wind, we have not installed any of the projects, but onshore we have in place. So out of maybe 50 or 60 gigawatt wind by 2030. So we are now shifting onshore targets to offshore targets. So that is our policy, and we are reframing the policies in that way by the way of purchase obligations. So we have earlier it was a solar RPO and non-solar RPO. Now we have taken that wind RPO that will compulsory, and that will be applicable for generating on the offshore wind turbines which are commissioned after 2022, not the earlier commission. So it will enforce the government is enforcing policy by such ways. So we have the very good targets and the renovation is going.
And in Vietnam, what's the interest in offshore wind?
Việt Nam như công ty biết thì chính phủ Việt Nam đã có cái tuyên bố tại cái hội nghị COP26 vào tháng 11 năm 2021 tại Glasgow, Vương quốc Anh. Thì Việt Nam đặt mục tiêu vào trung hòa carbon vào 2050. Và với tốc độ phát triển GDP Việt Nam là khoảng từ 5,5 cho đến 6,5% cho giai đoạn từ 2021 cho đến 2045. Thì cái nhu cầu điện cho phát triển kinh tế là rất lớn.
So, as you know, the Vietnamese government has a commitment at COP26 in Glasgow in November last year to have a net zero by 2050. And Vietnam economic growth at 5.5 to 6% from 2021 until 2045. So the demand for power growth is very big.
Và điều kiện Việt Nam thì một trong những nguồn điện để đảm bảo cung cấp điện đấy, có cái đảm bảo tính chủ động thì chính là cái nguồn năng lượng tái tạo như điện gió ngoài khơi, điện mặt trời và LNG. Đây là những nguồn điện chủ yếu, trong đó thì nguồn năng lượng tái tạo được tăng cái tỷ trọng trong gia tăng cái tỷ trọng trong cung cấp điện.
So to ensure the energy security, then the renewable energy and renewable energy, solar, onshore wind, offshore wind, and energy are the main generation source to secure the supply. And renewable energy is, is one of the main source. And so
Việt Nam là một nước nhiệt đới và có bờ biển dài trên 3.200 km, cần có tiềm năng và năng lượng tái tạo rất lớn. Đặc biệt về điện gió ngoài khơi thì có cái potential là khoảng độ 600 GW.
So Vietnam is a tropical country and has a very long coastal line, over 3,000 kilometers. So there are a lot of potential for renewable energy and especially offshore wind. The offshore wind potential is over 600 gigawatt. Yep.
Và đến nay thì cái năng lượng tái tạo đã chiếm khoảng 25% trong tổng công suất của hệ thống điện.
So the renewable energy account for about 25% of the total generation mix in Vietnam.
Với cái sự phát triển về công nghệ và chi phí năng lượng tái tạo nói chung và điện gió ngoài khơi đang ngày càng trở nên hấp dẫn, và chúng tôi cho rằng đây là một cái sự phát triển tất yếu trong cái cơ cấu nguồn điện của Việt Nam, vừa đảm bảo an ninh cung cấp điện, vừa đảm bảo cái mục tiêu trung hòa carbon vào 2050.
So as the cost of the renewable energy project is coming down, so we think that this is the source for the energy in the future. First, to reduce the cost of generation, and also to achieve the target of net zero by 2050.
Okay. Thank you very much. As I say, if anybody has a question, please raise your hand, but otherwise I'll move on a little bit. Marlene, you mentioned that 60% of your energy at the moment comes from coal. So how will offshore wind become part of the energy mix?
Okay, so we targeted achievement of 35% RE share by 2030. We emerging technology provides the necessary gaps, filling the gaps for our energy supply. And offshore wind, when we started the roadmap together with World Bank, when we were supported by World Bank in coming up with a roadmap for the Philippines, before we only have 5 service contracts with about 1.3 gigawatt of power as potential capacity. Right now, after we have launched the roadmap, we're now having 39 service contracts. Not to mention the numerous letter of intents that we are receiving. So it's about, right now, the service contract we awarded is about 30 gigawatt. And the demand of the Philippines actually is growing at a speed of 6% on annual basis. So we're seeing a lot of renewables coming in the next few years. That's why the government of the Philippines, together with our donor partners, are making all the necessary facilitation and promotion to come into the Philippines to promote and develop renewable energy, particularly those that are emerging in the country.
I think one thing to mention is that all these countries, they're growing their power demand. So offshore wind is not just for decarbonization, it's very much to supply power in the first place. Just pop to India. The greatest offshore wind resources in the south around Tamil Nadu.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to move all this power north.
Yeah.
What are your plans? What are your thoughts about that?
So green energy corridor that has been planned and it is started. It has been delayed, but it is taking place. But as you know that offshore wind generation is not coming. So that delay is immaterial. But there is a good plan of total green energy corridor that may carry maybe lot of power from south to end. Even alternatively, that ports in Tamil Nadu, they are ready to buy that power from the offshore wind, so that we don't need to transport all those power to the north. So that is very good. That will reduce the transmission also.
And there's a similar situation in Vietnam where the greatest offshore wind resource is to the southeast, which could service Ho Chi Minh City, but Hanoi is a long way to the north. So what are the thoughts in Vietnam as to move the power to the demand?
Rồi. Thì chúng tôi có qua cái số liệu cái roadmap World Bank hỗ trợ tài trợ thì có 2 khu vực có cái tiềm năng điện gió lớn, điện gió ngoài khơi lớn.
So in the roadmap that's sponsored and done by the World Bank, there are 2 areas that have a big offshore potential.
Khu vực có tiềm năng lớn nhất chính là ngoài khơi Nam Trung Bộ.
The biggest area is in the south of central Vietnam.
Và khu vực ngoài khơi của Vịnh Bắc Bộ có là của miền Bắc thì tuy có thấp hơn ở miền Nam nhưng mà cũng là một cái khu vực điện gió ngoài khơi cũng tương đối lớn.
The northern part is also a bit less than the south, but it still have a lot of potential.
Thì chúng tôi cũng có dự kiến là sẽ đầu tư khuyến khích thu hút đầu tư vào cái khu vực điện gió ngoài khơi ở Nam Trung Bộ và xây dựng cái đường truyền tải chuyển 10 gigawatt ra phía Bắc.
So we plan to develop the offshore wind in the southern part of the central, and then build a transmission line to transmit 10 gigawatt to the north where the demand is.
Bằng việc là convert cái đường dây 500 AC to 500 DC.
So yeah, we plan to convert the 500 kV from AC to DC to transmit that.
Xây dựng thêm một cái mạch đường dây một chiều mới nữa.
And also build another DC line from the south to the north.
Để truyền tải cái điện gió ngoài khơi ở phía Nam cho phụ tải phía Bắc.
To transmit those offshore wind power from the south to the demand in the north.
Very good. And in Sri Lanka, there are certain parts where the wind is best for offshore. What are your plans?
We have already developed some transmission line in that direction. Even the wind farm also started in the Mena Peninsula area also to cater the demand and the generation capacity. We have already done the research, and accordingly we have already constructed. But the southern part of Sri Lanka also we have earmarked, but that is in the second stage. And gradually we are trying our best to enhance the capacity of the transmission line to absorb the existing excess power generating from the offshore wind power. Then there won't be any issues in Sri Lankan context. If it is anything to do access, then we are encouraging private sector, the partners also working hand in hand with the government also to enhance the capacity of the transmission line to absorb the excess capacity.
Very good. Do we have any questions? If not, I can see a few people in the audience that I recognize that I'll ask to introduce a question. Charles, come on, you're front row. You've got to go for a question. Can we have a microphone down here, please?
Hi, I'm just interested in finding out what, for each of the countries, which is the greatest challenge and which is the greatest opportunity that you face?
Okay, Sri Lanka, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Our case, we are having already prepared the roadmap, and the same time we have to prepare regulatory and legal aspect for the when it is come to the the offshore wind, which we are now working with the World Bank and see how best we can do. At the same time, we would like to have an initial discussion with the investors also, how we can move forward. Rather than wait in the last moment also, it will be given the more opportunity for us to work and share the experience and discussion how the private sector investors are thinking and see how best the government policies can prepare according to the win-win situation of the private sector investment as well as the government expectation and the target also we have set forward.
Mareshwar, yeah, please.
So in India, there we had prepared targets 2 years back for both onshore, offshore, but on offshore front, we are lagging that. But because of this government, there were disputes between state and versus central. That issues were solved, and lot of discussions were held during last 2 years. And now we are reframing that the targets so that we are moving from onshore to offshore and more from because that lot of solar is there. So we want that generation which complement the solar generation during afternoon. So otherwise we need to install the batteries. Now batteries will not give the generation, it will just shave off the loads balancing. But offshore wind at the similar cost will give us additional generation with a balancing. So we are moving towards offshore. That is with a more CEF. onshore, we don't have the CU, around 20% CU, 25%, but onshore 25%, offshore around 45-50%. So we are moving with that policy, both synchronizing the states decision and the center's decisions. So that we are enforcing.
Mr. Hung, what are the greatest challenges and opportunities?
Đối với Việt Nam thì có những khó khăn lớn nhất và thuận lợi lớn nhất tôi xin chia sẻ với các quý vị ở đây. Về thuận lợi thì chính phủ Việt Nam có quyết tâm chính trị rất lớn trong cái việc phát triển năng lượng tái tạo. Coi đây là một giải pháp quan trọng để đảm bảo an ninh cung cấp điện và hướng tới mục tiêu trung hòa carbon vào 2050.
So about the opportunity, the biggest one is the political willingness from the government to develop the renewable energy, for the energy security, and also to achieve the target of carbon neutral.
Tiềm năng về điện gió ngoài khơi ở Việt Nam cũng đủ lớn để hấp dẫn các nhà đầu tư trong và ngoài nước.
And the offshore wind potential is big enough to attract the investor from international and also domestic.
Việt Nam cũng đã phát triển và có được một chút kinh nghiệm về phát triển điện gió gần bờ và trên bờ.
Vietnam also has some experience in developing onshore and nearshore wind projects.
Về thách thức thì Việt Nam phát triển năng lượng nói chung và đặc biệt năng lượng tái tạo để vừa đảm bảo đủ cung cấp điện nhưng phải với chi phí hợp lý, hài hòa giữa nhà nước, nhà đầu tư và người sử dụng điện.
So in terms of challenge, Vietnam want to develop the renewable energy for the supply, but also at the cost that is can be met between the government and the investor, right?
Can harmonize
state, the benefit between the
and
government.
consumer.
And in the Philippines, what
Thank you,
are you?
Alistair. For offshore wind potential, the government has identified under the SMAP study around 179 gigawatt of potential offshore wind capacity in the country. And offshore wind is actually emerging, but we see the interest of the private sector into developing offshore wind in the country alongside other renewable energy that we have now in our power sector in the country. The government of the Philippines is committed to renewable energy development. In the last State of the Nation address, President Marcos has emphasized that the Philippines should go for renewable energy. And the Secretary has been mentioning also offshore wind development in the country. The challenge maybe we have right now, considering this is an emerging market, is to capacitate all the government agencies in issuing permits and licenses. So we need to build information, the capacity and understanding of this government agency so that we can facilitate the issuance of these permits and licenses. And actually, the Philippines has a law that provides or mandate all government agencies to act on a number of days. No? So it will not, the developer will be ensured that there is a timely issuance of the permits, and we call it energy virtual one-stop shop. So we will integrate the requirements of the offshore wind in the EVOS that we have in the country.
Very good. One thing to mention is you mentioned roadmaps. These are documents that have been funded, they're studies by the World Bank. They're available on the World Bank ESMAP website for free, and they're sort of, the studies are something like $250,000 each. They're quite in depth and really look not just at the best practice in offshore wind, but applying it to each of these countries. And there's one for the Philippines, there's one for Vietnam, and there are ones in preparation for Sri Lanka and India. So strongly suggest you go and have a look at those. Do we have any questions? Otherwise, I'm thinking, Nick, do I recognize you from Japan? Would you like to ask a question?
Thank you for pointing me. I'm Nick Heguchi from Baker McKenzie, Tokyo. My question is to develop offshore wind, the financing is very important, and the bankability is a key. Do you provide any government support to the off-taker? For example, in Vietnam, EVN is an off-taker, and we need a bankability, credit risk of the off-taker. So can you support the off-taker credit risk?
Very good. So for Mr. Hung, with EVN, what is it that the government of Vietnam can do to support the financing?
Em nói gì xem nào. Không, em nói đấy.
Whilst we're getting ready to answer, I'll ask the same question of you each as to what activities you see needed for bankability. Mr. Hung.
Đối với Việt Nam thì chính phủ chỉ đạo Bộ Công Thương là ban hành cái PPA template nhé. Và trong đó thì cái mẫu PPA đó thì nó có các cái điều khoản mà đã đảm bảo cho cái phân bổ rủi ro giữa cái bên nhà đầu tư và bên mua điện là EVN.
So the MOIT, the Ministry of Industry and Trade in Vietnam, issue a template PPA, and in that template there are terms that allocate the risk between EVN and the investor.
Thì việc mà cái giá điện thì cũng ban hành, cái Bộ Công Thương ban hành cái khung giá phát điện.
MOIT issue the framework for the tariff as well.
Thì trước đây giai đoạn đầu thì phát triển năng lượng tái tạo là dùng cái cơ chế feed-in tariff. Thế còn giai đoạn tiếp theo thì sẽ là cơ chế đấu thầu và giá điện trúng thầu hoặc đàm phán thì nằm trong cái khung giá do Bộ Công Thương ban hành.
So initially there was a feed-in tariff for the renewable energy project, but later on there will be an auction to determine the tariff, and the tariff will be in that framework.
Nhà đầu tư thì có thể tham gia thị trường điện hoặc theo PPA.
Investor can either join the power market or use the PPA.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And from Philippines, what's the government doing there about bankability?
Yes, in terms of our action and programs, we came out with what we call the Green Energy Auction Program. So there is a fixed contract based on the result of the auction that the off-taker, or I mean the developer is compensated. The Renewable Energy Act has provided generous incentive, both fiscal and non-fiscal, to the RE developers. And we are now integrating the offshore wind into this system so that they can avail the necessary incentives, as well as pursuing more of the auctions in the coming days or years. No? So we see that offshore wind is quite potential for the Philippines, considering we're an archipelagic country and we're surrounded by bodies of water. And that would help us develop various renewable energy technology, including offshore wind. So we have put in place the necessary policies, mechanism, regulation. In fact, our regulator is now studying the appropriate rate setting methodology for offshore wind, no, under Danish government support. So we're open to communicating with our developers to make and de-risk investment as far as renewable energy is concerned, particularly on the offshore, considering it's now emerging in the country.
And in India, government's efforts to provide bankability.
So I will answer the question in different ways. So I'm not the financial guy, nor from the finance ministry, but we are striving to make the project bankable and feasible so that the generation from that project is dispatched and is absorbed by the, is bought by the, discoms. Now, because of the huge rate difference between the normal APCC, that average price in the market in today's scenario, and the offshore wind price, what that will be discovered in that study. So that is a huge gap, almost double or 3 times. So government is providing VGF, that's a viability gap funding, maybe 30%, maybe 20%, maybe 20% for onshore, maybe 30% for 40% for offshore. So that makes the project bankable and the financer will come. So, you know, there is a huge potential in India. There's a huge demand. The demand is rising at a very fast rate. And we require similar generation from RE because there are also we have the target of meeting more and more demand with the RE. So obviously financing requirement will be more, even though we have the capability, but not that much. So international financing will be very much required.
And in Sri Lanka, your thoughts on bankability?
Yeah, we are always thinking about the bankability of the product project when we are developing also. Then in the same time that government of Sri Lanka also giving some assurance of the taking the purchasing of the excess energy also. In addition that when we are developing our policies also, that policy is now under developing and consideration also currently in the when it is come to the offshore wind energy. We are taking care about this aspect also, how we can encourage the bankability project in the case of Sri Lanka, because we are very much fortunate because our shallow waters have not much expenses will be no need to expend much resources about that part. That is the extra extra return we can get from that particular area itself. Then any investor come, then they can also get the very favorable situation compared to the other part of the world also. Then our policies will be formulated to attract more bankable projects. In the same time to minimize the risk factor as well. We are, even though currently we are facing some problem in our country, but we are trying our best to overcome this problem within the short period of time. In the same time, we are encouraging private sector investors to come and have a very good environment for them to have this kind of projects, not only the supply of energy for the domestic usage, even the exporting the energy in the case of green hydrogen also. We are expecting to generate because our opportunities according to the World Bank initial assessment around 92 gigawatt hours, but we don't have much ambitious target, but we think we can 1 or 2 gigawatt hours to be at the initial stage.
So here at Hamburg, you've got the industry at your feet, you've got developers, you've got supply chain, you've got financiers and many other services and such. What would be your message to the industry? Mr. Hung, would you like to go first?
Với các quý vị từ rất nhiều các lĩnh vực khác nhau tham gia buổi hôm nay thì tôi có lời thông điệp gửi đến các quý vị là hãy mạnh dạn, tự tin đến đầu tư tại Việt Nam và sẽ gặt được cái trái ngọt trong cái hoạt động đầu tư đó, và Việt Nam sẽ cam kết mạnh mẽ đồng hành cùng với các nhà đầu tư trong sự nghiệp phát triển điện gió ngoài khơi tại Việt Nam, và chúc cho các quý vị thành công trong lĩnh vực này tại Việt Nam.
So the message to the industry from Vietnam is that please come to Vietnam and invest. Be patient. Be aggressive. It's a bit strong words, but be patient. Be step forward, and you will harvest the fruit. And we are committed to go together with you in the journey to develop the renewable energy in Vietnam.
And Moreshwar in India, what's your message to the industry?
So as I told earlier, there is a huge potential huge demand. So our governments are striving. We are inviting on behalf of our government to all stakeholders to come to India, participates in the bid, set up manufacturing facility and help us in meeting the decarbonization drive. And by setting up more and more RE, maybe solar offshore to the maximum.
Go
The
on
case
for
of
it.
Sri Lanka also, we are, as I earlier mentioned about that, we would like to have an initial dialogue with the investors to how to move forward. And the same time that we are encouraging more private sector investor to come in collaboration with, sometimes if they want to form the joint venture with the government also, it will be possible. In the same time, then we can develop because our potential is very much higher. Compared to our country situation also. This is a good opportunity to harness the resources available with the stage by stage basis also to affordable costs. Also to get the win-win situation for the government as well as the investors. Also, that's why we told that the early engagement is better than the waiting the last.
Go on, Mylene, go for it.
Yeah, actually, the Department of Energy or the Philippines wants to work hand in hand with the expert in offshore wind, considering we need to understand the intricacies of developing so that when we develop the necessary guidelines, rules, it's easy for us because it's an industry practice.
Yeah.
And we will listen to whatever challenges or concern they may have in pursuing projects, possibly in the Philippines. And rest assured that the government is willing to support given the necessary policy and mechanisms to enable the integration of renewable energy in the country. So we need more investors. We need more experts to guide us in the various areas of offshore wind development. So that would include establishing the local supply, content, and then the ports and harbor, and of course on how to partner with our local developers. Thank you.
Very good. So South and East Asia is open for business. Could I ask you to have a round of applause for our participants? Thank you all.
Thank you.
very much.
And see who we would like to talk to you next.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.